Now, hundreds of people are dead and thousands missing after catastrophic floods in Germany and Belgium and elsewhere across northern and western Europe. Unknown numbers are left homeless. Meteorologists are predicting more storms to come, so that an already dreadful situation seems likely to get even worse. Now, the question many people are already asking is the extent to which the extreme weather responsible for all of this is the result of human impact on the climate. Are events like this likely to be more and more of a feature of life in the future? Well, joining me to help us discuss that is Professor Miles Allen, leader of the Climate Research Programme at the University of Oxford. Hello, thank you very much for joining us. Explain to us, first of all, I suppose, what is the nature of your work and research?
Well, one of the things I've worked on a lot over the past 15 years has been how we make this link between extreme weather and climate change, because we very seldom see weather events that absolutely could not have happened without human influence on climate. I mean, if you go back enough hundreds of years, you'd probably find similar rainstorms that are happening in Europe, even though we've broken a few records over the period for which we have rainfall records available. So it's not as if we're seeing things that simply could not have happened without greenhouse gases having been pushed up through our past emissions. But what we are seeing is loading the weather dice, if you like, towards certain kinds of weather events. And this is one of them. Extreme rainfall in summer is one of the kinds of extreme weather events that we definitely expect to have the dice loaded more and more towards it as we warm our planet.
Why is that? I mean, could you explain for a layman why it is that what we're doing is making that happen?
Yeah, no, it's actually pretty straightforward physics. Warmer air can hold more moisture, but it's not just that. It's the total amount of rainfall is controlled as well by the whole ability of the air to get rid of the energy that's released by the condensation of rain. And you put these two things together and we get a greater concentration of rainfall into the most intense weather events. That it almost has to happen. No matter, you don't need a climate model. You don't need a sort of very detailed understanding of what's going on in individual events. You know that globally, we have to see this concentration of rainfall, particularly in warm seasons, into the most extreme rainfall events. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We're not seeing that much of an increase in total rainfall, but we're seeing more of that rainfall being dumped in these very short duration extreme events.
How do we know, why do we know that the planet isn't warming, that the air isn't warmer as a result of natural processes, not our impact? We're at the tail end, geologically speaking, of an ice age. The planet is still warming. How do we know that these events, that we can pin them on us?
Actually, that's not. I mean, if we hadn't interfered with the climate, we'd have probably seen, if anything, a gentle cooling, barely detectable, but a very gentle cooling over the past century. So what we've seen overwhelmingly is because we've increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There's no natural explanation for the large-scale warming that we're seeing.
To bring it closer to home, in terms of where the locations in Germany and Belgium and elsewhere that have been so tragically struck, what locations here in Great Britain would you say are at risk of from this kind of weather event, were it to happen here?
Well, we've seen already weather events like the floods in Cumbria a few years ago, which were made more likely, for which the dice were loaded towards those events happening by human influence on climate. And in fact, we've done, colleagues of mine have actually done the research to establish how much these events have been made more likely. And you can start to quantify how much past greenhouse gas emissions are raising the risk of these kinds of events. And it's really important work. We're just we're starting it here in universities, But I'm firmly of the opinion it shouldn't be the job of universities to do this. It should be the job of the Met Offices of Europe and the world. They shouldn't be just settling for predicting the weather anymore. Part of their job should be to explain it as well.
Are we doing enough? Obviously we can affect directly our British impact on greenhouse gas emissions, consumption of carbon and the rest of it. But in a world picture, where we've got China and India opening hundreds of coal-fired power stations and so on, different estimates of how many and how quickly, to what extent should this be a much broader debate? How much can Little Britain, actually affect the situation one way or the other?
I wouldn't like to call this Little Britain, but we're supposed to be global Britain these days. And you're right, this is a global issue. It's exactly the kind of issue that needs global leadership. And that's something that our government aspires to, and it's something they have an opportunity to provide at the conference coming up in November, where Britain will be leading the world's major climate conference, the biggest one we've had, the most important one we've had since the Paris conference in 2015. And we have an opportunity to, move the dial and bring other countries with us, particularly by leading by example, by putting into place not just ambitious sounding promises, but practical solutions that other countries look to and think, yes, we could do that too, and it's not going to cripple our economies. We can actually all join together to solve this problem. Because that's one thing we absolutely have to make clear to everybody, is this is a deeply solvable problem. It's amazing how quickly people have moved from, oh, there's nothing to worry about, to, oh, it's too late. It's not too late. We could stop global warming within a generation if we wanted to, but we have to start now.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Allen. I'm going to put this out to the panel now. Just broaden it out. Is this a problem that we're taking seriously, do you think, Inaya? Or are we genuinely looking for someone else to fix it?
I think the planet or the climate is an incredibly complex system. It's hard to know exactly what our impact will be. But I think there are things that we can reasonably judge, whether that is pollution, to overfishing, to putting lots of things in the ocean. I think there are clear evidence that there are some adverse impacts that we are doing on the environment. I don't think it's unreasonable for any government to want to do something about that. But the question is, what are we going to do and how? And if that what often involves massive increases on taxes, massive increases on bills that actually end up harming people at the bottom, then that's something very questionable. And then in terms of the how, if it's this idea of kind of global leadership, which is often anti-democratic and not accountable to national populations, then that's also something that is completely legitimate to question. So those are the two things that I worry about in this.
Tom, I always think I would like to see the leaders, the Davos population, yes, the WEFs and whoever, leading by example. Ought they not to be saying, we will take no more international flights, no more private jets, we'll do everything by technology, we will live in carbon neutral houses? Shouldn't they be showing us how it's done and thereby inspiring the rest of us by showing that it can be done?
Well, it didn't happen at the recent G7 summit, didn't it? I mean, obviously there was a great backdrop to see for Cornwall, and, if you're doing your staycation there, good on old Cornwall. But yeah, I mean, look, we've seen this hypocrisy, haven't we, throughout the whole pandemic, not just in terms of COVID, but also in terms of the climate. Look, as a layperson, I mean, I just look at this, and of course, I want to do my bit for the planet, and the irony hasn't passed me, talking about masks earlier. That's a lot of landfill. Millions of these masks that are not recyclable are about to be
billions and billions
dumped.
of them.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of them are washing up on our beaches as well. But I think, you hit on something really interesting, which is to try and understand the extent to which the planet, which for millennia has always gone through periods of cooling and warming, and understanding our actual impact, and therefore what are the practical solutions that the Oxford professor was talking about there. Because again, if it's frankly a full frontal assault on ordinary working people's living standards, that's going to be a very, very difficult sell, isn't it? To say to people that you can't no longer go out and install boilers because the government's got a target to eradicate the current boilers by 2030. That's people's jobs and livelihoods at the end of the day. And the tax burden on people is already at the highest since the 1950s. So where else does the government go then for the revenue? And I think that's the worry. A new sort of green austerity really is what I'm concerned about.
Is it realistic, Mo? You know, they talk about, doing away with your gas boilers. You can't have the same amount of hot water. Do away with your car. Is it real? I mean, and we all appreciate the alleged scale of the problem, but can we expect people to put up with what they're about to be asked to put up with?
Well, there's a couple of things on the scale of the problem. One, I think we have to differentiate between what's pollution and what is climate-related. And if you look at climate-related deaths across the world in the last 100 years, in 1920 it was about 500,000 climate-related. Today it's more like 25,000 per annum. What I'm trying to say is that if you look at the way we deal with climate-related problems, in 1953, for instance, we had massive tidal floods in this country and in the Netherlands. There's 2,500 people lost their lives in those floods. So what did we do? We built flood defences. Right. What's happened in Germany is they haven't updated those drainage systems for a lot of years. They've used what they call sustainable urban drainage, which has been influenced a lot by the green debate, that we can't interfere in nature because we'll just make things worse. Actually, humans interfering in nature, building flood defences, building drainage systems, using pipes. If you have got these downpours in, densely populated areas where the rivers are going to rise, why not use drainage pipes?
So that's the point, isn't it? I mean, do we reverse our economic model, which is what I think some climate activists are suggesting, ban all flights, let's, get rid of boilers, don't eat meat,
Lockdown
all
for the climate.
Yeah, all of those things. Or is this not an opportunity to adapt as a human race? Shouldn't we be utilising technologies to innovate and adapt to the scale of climate change?
We're always changing our behaviour instead of actually adapting the environment to mitigate for these disasters.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.